Down there, life continues. The traffic is awful, stocks go on trading, and Star Trek is still showing. down there.
Processes of growth, cell division, maturation, copulation, ejaculation, ovulation, menstruation, fertilization, and also implantation. Secondly, you need to be able to label the organs on the female and the male reproductive systems. Then lastly, you need to be able to mention the functions of each organ on the female and the male reproductive systems. All this information is found under the CAPS document on page 59. Now, let's look at our pre-knowledge, right? What we can use as foundation to today's topic. So in grade 7, we introduced the topic of human reproduction, right? So we talked of the human reproductive system, right? So we mentioned that we have the male and the female. And the male has such organs as the epididymis, the testis, the urethra, the penis, vas deferens, prostate gland, seminal vesicle, and the bladder, right? Then for a female, we mentioned that they have parts for the reproductive system such as the vagina, the cervix, the ovaries, the fallopian tubes, and as well as the uterus. So now, we have a baseline activity that I need us to write quickly and test ourselves in terms of how much you understand so far. So number one, the statement says, read the following statements and say whether each one is true or false, right? And number one is saying, a full-term pregnancy is usually 40 weeks. Number two is saying, copulation is the last stage of human reproduction. Number three says, fertilization occurs when the egg cell and the sperm cell fuse together. Then the last question says, during pregnancy, the ovary releases the egg cell, right? So for all these statements, you need to just say whether it's true or false, right? So now, remember that you can send in your answers, your comments, or what you call your answers, your comments, or any questions regarding this lesson, right? On the number on the WhatsApp screen, which is 079 578 2908. So now I would like you to take about 5 minutes to complete this activity. Then after that, we'll meet for corrections. Welcome back again, grade 9s. Now remember, if you want to send in your answers, comments on this lesson, please don't forget to write down the name of your school, right? So that we recognize your school, right? So now, read the following statements and say whether each one is true or false, right? Number one is saying a full-term pregnancy is usually 40 weeks, right? And the answer is true, right? It is 40 weeks or 9 months, right? Number two is saying copulation is the last stage of human reproduction. And that is false, right? That is false. Number three is saying fertilization occurs when the egg cell meets with the sperm cell, right? Or when the egg cell fuses with the sperm cell, right? And the answer is true, right? The statement is true. Number four is saying during pregnancy, the ovary releases the egg cell. And the answer is false, right? So now, if you need some time to write down your corrections, I'm going to give you a quick minute to copy down your corrections quickly. Then after on, we continue with our lesson. Well, grade 9s, I hope that was enough time for us to write down corrections, right? So let's sail together with the ship. Now, moving on to terminology, right? The important terms that are entailed in this lesson. The first term that we have there is copulation, right? Copulation. Copulation is the process where the penis is placed inside the vagina, right? The second term that we have there is ejaculation, which is the rapid release of semen from the penis. Then we have offspring, right, which are babies or children, right, our young ones. We also have ovulation, which is the release of a ripe egg from the ovary. We then have menstruation, which is the breaking down of the lining of the uterus, right? The breakdown of the lining of the uterus. Then we have fertilization, which is the fusion of the egg and the sperm, right? When the egg cell and the sperm cell come together or they fuse together. That is fertilization. Then we have penis, right? Which is a male organ that places the sperm inside the female. Now let's continue together. The reproductive system, right? Let me remind you of the functions of the reproductive system, right? Firstly, system. We said that system is different organs working together for a specific function, right? So now we're talking about the different organs of a female and a male that enable to bring about what? Offspring, right? So now, the main function of the reproductive system is to produce sex cells, right? Sex cells that enable the continuation of species. The sex cells being the sperm cell and the egg cell, right? So that is the main function of the reproductive system, to produce sperm cells and egg cells, right? Those sperm cells and the egg cells, when they fuse together, they produce offspring, right? They produce offspring. So meaning what? The main function now of the reproductive system is to ensure the continuation of species, or to ensure the bringing about of offspring, right? By producing sex cells such as the sperm cell and the egg cell, right? So the structures that enable all these processes, right? It's what? from males, we have the testes that produce the sperm cells, right? And for females, you have ovaries that produce egg cells and a uterus where the baby grows. Are we together? So moving on. So we said that the reproductive system has the main role of producing offspring, right? And we said that offspring are our young ones, are the babies or children, right? So that is its main function, the continuation of species and producing more and more offspring. So males in this part, they are responsible for producing what? Sperm cells, whereas females are responsible for producing egg cells that will fuse together to form what? A baby, right? So when an egg cell and a sperm cell fuse together, a baby is formed, right? So now let's talk about this further. We say that males and females have special structures, right? And these special structures, they help them to produce these egg cells and the sperm cells, right? So females to be exact, they have ovaries, right? So in their reproductive system, they have a special organ called an ovary, right? So the ovaries, they enable the production of egg cells. And females also have a uterus, right? The uterus is the one that houses the baby during the gestation period, right? During pregnancy. It houses the unborn baby, right? So the ovaries, they create egg cells, whereas now the uterus is the baby, is the place where the baby develops, right? So when an egg cell from the ovaries of a female reproductive system, when it fuses with a sperm cell from a male reproductive system, what happens? We say that that process is fertilization, right? They are fusing together and become one cell, right? So we therefore say that a baby is formed as a result. Let's look at this diagram that illustrates what I've just said to you. So we have a sperm approaching what? The egg cell here, right? Looking at this, right? We have a sperm cell approaching what? The egg cell. As it reaches the egg cell, it starts to fuse with the egg cell, right? They become one, right? As they become one, we say that a baby is formed. So from there on, having that one cell that is a result of the fusion of the sperm cell and the egg cell, what happens now? Certain processes such as mitosis, right? Mitosis being the breaking down of one cell to bring about two cells that are identical to each other, right? So that one cell breaks and forms two cells that are identical to each other, and those cells also, they multiply. So remember now from our previous topics, we said that if you have two or more cells, you now have tissue, right? A group of those tissues, they form an organ. A group of those organs, they form systems. Those systems, they form what? A whole organism, right? So now, it starts from the simplest cell, being the sperm cell and the egg cell becoming one, then cell division taking place, so to ensure that the baby is fully developed and fully matured, right? So now, moving on, let's look at the main processes that happen during the reproduction process, right? Or in the reproductive systems. First of all, copulation, right? Copulation needs to take place in order to ensure the survival of species, right? Or the continuation of species, right? And copulation, we say that it's when the penis is placed inside the vagina of the female reproductive system. Then ejaculation takes place, right? Ejaculation being the rapid release of semen from the penis, right? Or when the penis releases sperm. Then ovulation, right? Now, ovulation happens specifically when? It happens specifically inside a female reproductive system, where you have now the egg being released from the ovaries into the fallopian tubes, right? And as well as menstruation. I like this part, right? Menstruation. So now, after copulation and ejaculation has taken place, right? Whether a baby is developed or not, right? Or a baby is formed or not, it will depend on either the egg was fertilized or not, right? So if the egg was not fertilized, menstruation occurs, right? Which is now the breaking down of the lining of the uterus, right? And which we know as periods, right? So you have now the lining of the uterus together with the egg cell leaving the body in the form of blood, right? So now if fertilization has taken place, right, which is the fusion of an egg and an egg cell and a sperm cell, right, implantation will take place, right? After they fuse together, if they fuse together or fertilization has taken place, you have now what we call an implantation, right? Implantation now, it's when the egg and the sperm sink together into the uterus to make sure that the baby is fully developed there. Also, parts of the processes is growth, right? Growth is when now the fetus that has been implanted grows over a 40-week period or 9 months period known as the gestation period, right? So also cell division. Cell division is where it's the one I've mentioned, right? Mitosis. Cell division is when the baby develops organs, right? From that cell being tissues, those tissues being organs, organ systems, and a fully developed organism as a baby, right? Then after that, the last one is maturation. It's when the baby now becomes fully formed and is then born. So now, remember now, the main focus of today's topic is talking more about the reproductive organs, right? To ensure or to find out what roles do they play in the systems of, or what roles do they play in the reproductive systems, right? So we have a reproductive system, right? For reproductive systems, we have for a male and a female, right? So remember, system, I'm reminding you again, system is different organs performing a certain function together, right? So now for a male reproductive system, it has different organs as well, right? Such as the epididymis, the penis, the urethra, the testes, some glands such as the corpus gland, the prostate gland, and the seminal vesicle, and as well as the urethra, right? So for the female reproductive system, we have the vagina, we have the endometrium, which is the lining of the uterus, we have the cervix, the ovary, and fallopian tubes, right? And the uterus and the uterus all together, right? So now let's scrutinize these systems one by one, right? So male reproductive organs. Let's start with them, right? Male reproductive organs. So now I'm showing you this picture to remind you that this is a whole reproductive system, right? It has different organs such as the scrotum, the testes, epididymis, the penis, the urethra, vas deferens, the bladder, seminal vesicle, and as well as the prostate gland, right? So now, we say that the male reproductive system includes the penis, the sperm ducts known as the vas deferens as well, the testes, the scrotum, and as well as the urethra, right? So just to remind you, all its main goal or the main goal of the reproductive system of a male is to produce what? Sperm, right? To make and store sperm, and as well as to place the sperm in the female. That is all the system is about, right? To ensure the survival of species by making and storing sperm, and as well as placing the sperm in the female. So now, one by one, right? Let's talk about the penis, right? So the penis now, it places the sperm inside the female, right? Its function is to mainly place the sperm inside the female. So how does it do that? It does that by becoming erect, right? By becoming erect, and it becomes erect when it receives extra blood that is pumped into it, right? So by becoming erect, it's able to place the sperm inside the female reproductive system. And as well as its role, it's to do what? Is to release semen in the vagina during ejaculation. So this is a picture of a penis, right? So when you look at a penis, it also has different parts on it, right? It has the urethra that allows for the passing of urine and also the passing of semen, but never both at the same time, right? So now, We have the urethra, we have the glands, we have the foreskin, the corona, and the frenulum, right? So now, as you can see, that it is made up of different parts as well as an organ that is important in reproduction, right? So now, it has the urethra, the glands, the corona, and the foreskin. But now, I would like to ask you one question. Did you know that the foreskin can be surgically removed in a process called circumcision? Right? So now, this is done as a religious practice for other religions, right? Like the Jewish religions, and it can also be done for medical reasons, right? To mention some reasons for medical reasons, it's easy hygiene, right? It's easy to clean the penis, and also it decreases the risk of contaminating what STDs and STIs, right? So that's why this process is performed, right? For either religious reasons, cultural reasons, or medical reasons. Moving on. The second part that we're going to talk about is the sperm duct, right? So the sperm duct is a tube that carries sperm from the testes to the penis, right? So remember, these are different organs, but they are all focusing on one goal: to make and store sperm, and also to deliver sperm into the female reproductive system, right? So it is a tube that carries this sperm from the testes, right? So it carries sperm from the testes all the way, and this is our sperm duct, right? It collects sperm from the epididymis, where it is temporarily stored, and the sperm travels along the sperm duct into the urethra, where it's going to be passed out to the vagina. Right. The testes, right? The testes now, their main function is to manufacture sperm, right? They make sperm and also to produce the male sex hormone, which is testosterone. Remember, we talked about testosterone in our previous topic, right? Testosterone is responsible for the male sexual secondary characteristics, right? Like the development of facial hair, the broadening of shoulders, the deepening of the voice, the enlarging of the genitals, and so on, right? So now, the testes are responsible for such roles, right? To make sperm and also to make testosterone, or to produce testosterone, right? So this is a picture of a testis, right? Right? This is a picture of a testis, right? So this testis here is for singular, right? And for plural, it is testis with an E between the T and the S, right? So now, this is our testis, right? So when looking closer to our testis, it has different parts as well, right? It has parts like the seminiferous tubules and also the epididymis, right? This is the epididymis, right? The epididymis now, after the sperm have been manufactured in the testes, it is where now they are stored temporarily, right? Sperm are stored in this tube called the epididymis temporarily, and from there on, that's where they will be collected by the sperm duct and out the urethra. Right. Also, we have scrotum, right? A scrotum now is a bag of skin that holds the testes outside the body, right? It is there for a special role, right? It is to regulate the temperature of the testes, right? As we say that this keeps them at a temperature slightly cooler than the body temperature that is suitable for making sperm. So if we say that the body temperature is 37 degrees Celsius, right? So it means now the scrotum needs to be lowered so that it accommodates what? A temperature that is cooler than the body temperature by 2 to 3 degrees at least, to ensure the manufacturing of a healthy sperm, right? So if the body temperature is 37 degrees, it means what? The scrotum will regulate a temperature of about 34 or 35 degrees Celsius, right? So now, in some cases, you find that it is cold, right? The weather is different, it is cold, right? And your body also is cold. That's why the scrotum moves up closer to your body, and also making sure that it regulates or it maintains a stable temperature. right? So now, in this diagram, this is our scrotum, right? We say that it is the bag of skin that holds the testes outside the body, right? This is our scrotum, right? It ensures that the temperature is regulated and ensuring that the temperature is always cooler than the body temperature. Right. We also have the urethra, right? The urethra only has a simple function, right? It is to carry semen and urine to the outside of the body, right? Semen and urine, but never both at the same time, right? Remember, urine is passed out as part of as part of the excretory system, right? And part of waste products. Then the semen is only uh, released during ejaculation, right? So this is the urethra. It is the tube that leads from the inside to the outside of the penis. So now, we also have the male glands, right? We have the male glands, which are all responsible for releasing fluids that contain food from the sperm. To mention the glands, we have the corpus gland, right? And the prostate gland, which manufactures what? Which creates semen, right? Or fluid that is mucus-like, right? And we also have the seminal vesicle, right? Those are our glands that release fluids that contain food for the sperm. So now we have activity one to test ourselves with quickly, right? So going through the questions, right? Question one says, give two main functions of the male reproductive system. Whereas number two says, list the organs that the sperm passes through, starting with the testes. Then number three says, explain why the testes are held in a bag of skin outside the body. So now you have a diagram also to help you answer this activity, right? So I'll give you 4 minutes to complete this activity. Then afterwards, we're going to meet for corrections. Welcome back, grade 9s. Now let's mark the word together, right? Remember, number 1 was saying give 2 main functions of the male reproductive system. Number 2 saying list the organs that the sperm passes through, starting with the testes. Then number 3 says explain why the testes are held in a bag of skin outside the body. These are our solutions, right? Number 1, the function is to produce the sperm and male sex hormone, which is testosterone, right? And to ensure the survival of species. Number 2 says it's the testes first, following the sperm duct and the urethra, right? Then number 3, it is for sperm production. The sperm production occurs best at a temperature that is slightly lower than the body temperature, right? That is the reason why the scrotum hangs outside the body. Now, please take a quick minute to copy down the corrections, then after that we shall continue. Welcome back again, grade 9s. Now let's sail together again, right? So now, female reproductive organs, right? We have dealt with the male reproductive organs. So let's look at the female reproductive organs. So just to remind you, right, I've put now the female reproductive system. It has different organs such as the vagina, the cervix, the uterus, the ovaries, and the fallopian tubes. So now, remember that the female reproductive organs, they include what I've just counted now, the vagina, uterus, ovaries, and fallopian tubes, which are also known as oviducts. So the female reproductive system, it has a main function as well, right? To ensure the survival of species, right? By doing what? By making egg cells, and as well as to provide suitable conditions for the growth of a baby. So let's look at now the organs one by one again. So now the female reproductive system has a vagina, right? The vagina is the muscular tube that opens to the outside of the body, right? Its function is to receive the penis during copulation, right? And it allows for the birth of a baby, right? It serves as a birth canal, right? So looking at our female reproductive system, right? This whole part here, right? This whole part here is the vagina of the female reproductive system. It leads to the outside of the body. It receives the penis during copulation, and it serves as a birth canal, right? By allowing for the birth of a baby. Following that, we have the uterus, right? The uterus now is hollow with a thick muscular wall, right? And as well as this is the place where the baby grows when a woman is pregnant, right? This is where the place where the baby grows and fully develops during the period of pregnancy. So now the uterus is also called a womb, right? So looking at our diagram here, right? This is our uterus, right? This whole organ here is our uterus. This is where the baby grows. This is where implantation takes place. And this is where a baby is fully developed during that period of pregnancy. We also have ovaries, right? And ovaries, their function is to make and release egg cells, right? By releasing one each month. And also they are responsible for the sex hormone known as estrogen, right? The female sex hormone known as estrogen. So these are our ovaries from the diagram. We have two on either side, right? Both of them have the duty of releasing one egg each month, right? During that menstrual cycle, during those series of changes that happen in a 28-day cycle in a female reproductive system. So now, let's look at this, right? Just to remind you, right? The ovaries secrete egg cells, right? For what? For continuation, for possible pregnancy or for possible fertilization, right? So if the sperm cell does not get to the egg cell, then a female has her period, right? Which we say is menstruation. And it occurs when a female bleeds from her vagina, right? That is only when the egg cell did not meet with the sperm cell, or we will say that when fertilization did not take place, right? So now, remember the sperm cell is supposed to move to the egg cell and to make sure they fertilize together, right? So an egg cell is released from the ovaries into the fallopian tubes for possible fertilization. And if fertilization did not take place, the lining of the uterus, which is this one, right? The lining of the uterus and together with the egg, they leave the system in the form of blood, right? Then we say a person is menstruating. So when an egg cell is implanted or when fertilization has taken place, we therefore say that a woman is pregnant, right? And that person is due to be pregnant for 40 weeks or 9 months, which we call the gestation period, right? Then after that, the baby will be born after 40 weeks or after that 9 months as it matures inside the uterus, right? So now, if fertilization has taken place, we therefore say that a woman is pregnant and the baby will grow inside the uterus, right? For the whole period of 40 weeks or 9 months. So now, we have the oviducts, right? The fallopian tubes. The oviducts, they have the duty of carrying the egg cell or the function of carrying the egg cell from the ovaries to the uterus, right? This is where the sperm meets the egg and fertilization occurs. Where in the fallopian tubes, right? And the fallopian tubes are lined with tiny hairs that sweep the egg along from the ovaries into them, right, into the fallopian tubes and to the uterus for possible implantation. So now, we also have activity 2, right? Activity 2 for number 1, it says give the main functions of the female reproductive system. The number 2 says describe the path of an egg cell from the ovary until it is released from the body. Then number 3 says, explain the difference between menstruation and menstrual cycle. And for this activity as well, I've also put the reproductive system so that it helps you to answer these questions, right? So now, please take 5 minutes to complete this activity. Then after that, we'll meet for corrections. Welcome back, grade 9s. Let's look at the questions, then answer the questions there. Right, number 1 is saying give the main functions of the female reproductive system. Number 2 says describe the path of an egg cell from the ovary until it is released from the body. The number 3 says explain the difference between menstruation and the menstrual cycle. So looking at our solutions, number 1, the main function is to produce eggs and the female sex hormone, which is estrogen, right? And number 2, right? This is the pathway of an egg up until it is released from the body, right? It's the ovary first, following the fallopian tubes, following the uterus, and lastly the vagina when the person is menstruating. Right. This is the pathway, right? From the ovaries, right, to the fallopian tubes, to the uterus, and lastly through the vagina. Number 3, the difference between menstruation and menstrual cycle. So menstruation is simply the breaking down of the lining of the uterus, right? And when the blood is leaving the body via the vagina, right? The menstrual cycle, it is a series of changes that happen in the female reproductive organs where the uterus is prepared for a fertilized egg. Right? So these are your answers, and I'd like you to take a quick 2 minutes to copy down the corrections. Welcome back, grade 9s. Now let's look at our homework activity, right? So today I want you to go home and test yourself in terms of how much you understand from these previous 2 topics, right? So now, number 1 is saying define the following: A, copulation; B, ovulation, right? Then number 2, a woman releases an egg every month for 37 years, right? So calculate how many eggs she releases in total and show all your working. So take a quick 2 minutes again to copy down the homework activity. Welcome back again, grade 9s. Now, let's summarize what we have learned for today, right? So today we're talking about the human reproductive system and specifically the reproductive organs, right? So remember that the human reproductive system, it has its main function, which is to ensure the continuation of species. How? By producing what? Sex cells. Sex cells such as the sperm cells and egg cells. The egg cells being manufactured by the female reproductive system in the ovaries and being released one by one each and every month, and they are released each and every month. The female reproductive system releases one egg, right? So now, the sperm cells now are manufactured in the testes of a male reproductive system. So when these two fuse together, they ensure the survival or continuation of species, right? By bringing what? Offsprings, right? So now, they combine together under a process called fertilization, and they fertilize and the cell becomes one, and from that cell it divides to form tissues, organs, systems, and systems, forming a whole organism as a baby. So now let's look at these parts that play a role in these two different reproductive systems, right? Starting off with the female reproductive system. The female reproductive system has a vagina, right? A vagina is a place or site of copulation, right? And as well as it serves as a birth canal. It receives the penis during copulation, right? We have the endometrium, which is the lining of the uterus, right? Which thickens and becomes filled with blood vessels in a 28 days cycle, right? Preparing for a possible pregnancy, right? And if that pregnancy did not take place, it falls off or it breaks off as the lining of the uterus and leaves the body in the form of blood. We have the ovaries, right, that we have mentioned. The ovaries, they release one egg per month, right? They manufacture eggs and also they release the female sex hormone, which is estrogen. Then we have the fallopian tubes, which collect the ovaries, collect the egg cells from the ovaries and to the fallopian tubes and as well as to the uterus for possible implantation, right? Then we have the uterus, which houses the baby or develops or nourishes the baby during pregnancy or that 40 weeks period, right? Now, for the male reproductive system, the male reproductive system also has its different parts, right? Like the testes, right, known as testicle. The testes, they manufacture sperm cells, and as well as they produce the sex hormone, which is testosterone, right? Which is responsible for the male sexual characteristics, right? Sexual or secondary characteristics, such as the development of beard, the development of facial hair all over the body, the enlarging of genitals, deepening of voice, and so on. Right? Now, behind the testicle or the testes, there is a tube known as the epididymis. So after the sperm have been manufactured, the epididymis stores the sperm temporarily. Then we also have what? A set of glands like the seminal vesicle, the prostate gland, and the Cowper's gland, right? All those glands, they secrete fluids that nourish the sperm, right? And also we have the sperm duct, right, which is known as the vas deferens, which collects sperm from the epididymis and transports it to the urethra, where the sperm will be passed out via the penis of the male reproductive system. So I hope you have enjoyed today's lesson. Coming forward, the next lesson will be having human reproduction again, and specifically now the stages of reproduction. So from me to you now, thank you and goodbye.